Hello, cruel, cruel world. My name is Dr. Shaham Das. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. You can call me the ominous Shahamanist. So this video is 5 myths about murderers. So just to give you some context, I'm talking from my own clinical experience. I work as an expert witness. I give evidence in a whole wide range of cases, different crimes, different mental illnesses. I speak in court during criminal trials. I do about 50 cases a year, and about 4 or 5 of them are related to murder, and I've been doing this for about 10 years, so you do the math, or if you're English, you do the maths, or if you're French, you do the, how you say, mathematiques. And I've also worked in locked psychiatric units. I've probably looked after about 50 men, and they are mostly men who have killed somebody in the past, usually related to mental illness, because that's why they got to the psychiatric units in the first place. Anyway, so what I'm saying is this video is not just random. I've not just Googled it, honestly. I'm using my clinical experience, my interactions with people who've taken lives, and I'm going to tell you what I've learned. I'm going to debunk some myths. My whole point, the whole purpose of making these videos is to get you, my dear viewers, to be thinking like a forensic psychiatrist. Also to take over the world. That's not going well. Okay, myth number 1 about murderers. All murderers are mentally ill. So yeah, some murderers definitely do have mental health diagnoses, but most do not. The ones in the psychiatric units obviously do. I suppose it depends how you define mental illness, right? If you're the lay person, you might say that anybody who does something as extreme as killing another person, especially if it's somebody they don't know, is mentally ill. But that's not the psychiatric definition. The psychiatric definition is somebody that has to have like a recognized mental disorder, like depression, like bipolar, like schizophrenia, who has specific symptoms like paranoid delusions. And of all killers, only a very small proportion have those things. And here's something to throw a pie in the ointment. Even if they do have symptoms of mental illness, or if they are mentally ill, most of the time it's quite a mild kind of symptoms. It's not severe enough to control their actions. So let me put that in context for you. Let's say you had a gangland murder. So you've got 2 boys, let's say they live in South London. There's a lot of back and forth. They're drill rappers. You know the deal. One of them stabs and killed another one. The chances are the killer, the murderer, if he was in a gang, probably does have a background of trauma, probably does have a degree of anxiety and depression, probably has substance misuse issues as well. But I think most people would agree that they're still in control of their actions. So what I'm saying is just because you have a mental illness doesn't necessarily equate to any kind of psychiatric defense. For severe mental illnesses that do have a psychiatric defense, like diminished responsibility, not guilty by reason of insanity, I'm sure you heard of these phrases, then they might not go through the criminal justice system. They might not go to prison. I'm not going to go into those psychiatric defenses because it'll take too long. But it reminds me of the case of Kalakane, so the Nottingham stabbing, very, very tragic case, of course. The family are very upset because he got a finding of diminished responsibility. Don't want to talk about it now, but if you look on the links, I have made lots of videos about this. Go chickadee, check it out. And just to throw another hammer into the works, if they were mentally ill, let's say that they're in a psychiatric unit like Broadmoor, so they haven't gone to prison, they're not technically murder. So in the eyes of the law, if it's diminished responsibility, for example, it's manslaughter. So you can call them killers, yes. You can say they committed homicide, yes, but they're not technically murders. So let's face it, if I had a thumbnail that said 5 myths about manslaughterers, you wouldn't click, would you? Shame on you for clicking the bait, and shame on me for clickbaiting you in the first place. So what I'm trying to say is, for example, in the Kalakane case, I'm not taking anything away from the horrific nature of what he did and the irreparable damage to the families, but I'm just saying in the eyes of the law, technically not murder, manslaughter. Okay, myth number 2 about killers, murderers. Murderers kill strangers. That's true, but it's actually more commonly not true. So they do and they can, like the case of Kalakane, which shocked the nation because they were complete strangers who were at the wrong place at the wrong time. But you're much more likely to be killed by somebody that you know, especially if you're young and especially if you're female. Luckily, I'm neither of those things. I just happen to like Miley Cyrus, all right? Get off my case. So the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, said that in the year ending March 2022, which is when the most recent statistics are available, 62% of people, of victims of murder, knew their killer. And this was higher for females, 70%, compared to male victims, 52%. And for victims under 16, the proportion that knew their suspects was even higher. It was about 88%. So just as a side note, from my personal experience, obviously I deal with people with severe mental illness, which, as I said before, is a minority of killers. I say the incidence of them killing strangers is more than the average normal person. And that's often because they suffer from very bizarre delusions, and that means because they're so sort of unpredictable and inexplicable and ununderstandable, they can randomly strike out at any strangers. Again, the case of Kalakane keeps matching up to what I'm talking about. So I'd say probably about 50% of the clients that I see will have killed strangers. Myth number 3 about murders: murderers will kill again. So we all know that saying, don't we? A giraffe will never change its spots. But actually, it's very unlikely for somebody who's killed before to go on to kill again. So if you're a stats nerd, I'll tell you something that you might find interesting. In the United Kingdom, the Ministry of Justice, according to their statistics, between 2009 and 2019, there were 129 criminals who were originally jailed for life for murder and who got a second life sentence. So I've got a question for you, my psych for sore guys and gals. What number of those 129 who got a second life sentence was it for murder? So I know some of you are probably thinking, hang on, ominous Shamanus, you handsome devil. How can you have a life sentence in the past and get another one? Surely life means life. I can see you scratching your chins in confusion. Not you, you've got eczema. And that's because there's a misunderstanding between what a life sentence is. So a full life tariff, which is a small proportion of life sentence, means that you go to prison and you never leave, you die in prison. But that's actually very rare. It's for like multiple murders or extremely horrific levels of violence. Far more common, you will have life sentences, which means that the prisoner has a tariff, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, at which point is the earliest they can be released. And then once they're released, they're followed up by probation in the community for the rest of their lives. So it's the follow-up that's the life bit, not the actual prison sentence. And I would say one of the reasons that it's rare for one murderer to go on to do it again is because killings often occur in a very specific context. It could be in an argument against somebody in a pub. It could be jealousy in a romantic relationship. Alcohol intoxication is very, very common. It could be mental illness. So it could be somebody like the kind of person that I'd rehabilitate who hasn't taken their antipsychotics. So my point being is the chances of the exact same set of circumstances happening again is very, very rare. And it might not be popular to say, but often killers have genuine remorse and guilt. Sometimes they feel bad for what they did. And even sometimes, even if they don't, they selfishly don't want to go through the whole process again because they've spent many, many years of their adult life in prison or potentially a psychiatric hospital. And even when they leave hospital, they're under, they have all these hoops they have to jump through from probation. So purely from a selfish perspective, the average person that's gone through that's been punished, won't want to go through it again. And as I said before, because they're being supervised by probation, the chance of them getting away is less because they're being monitored. So what I'm trying to say, what I'm babbling on about is while the act of life-taking has significant consequences, many individuals who've been incarcerated can and do go on to live productive lives after serving their sentences. Rehabilitation programs, community support play crucial roles in reintegration. Now, there's a whole other argument topic, which is whether psychopaths change their behaviours, not murderers, psychopaths. And you could say by definition, a psychopath doesn't learn from their mistakes. It's one of the criteria. So you could say that they don't actually change their spots, but not all murderers are psychopaths and not all psychopaths are murderers, not for a long shot. Anyway, I don't want to get into that now because we don't have time. I've made loads of videos on this channel about psychopaths, difference between psychopaths and narcissists, difference between psychopaths and sociopaths, blah, 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 etc., etc. I'll send you the links. I'll put the links in the description of the videos. Okay, moving on. Myth number 4 about killers is that serial killers are these brilliant criminal masterminds. I get it. I really do get it. It makes for like a snazzy, interesting, sexy, cool film or TV program if you have this really clever, kind of provocative serial killer that leaves behind clues. So there's this like bat and mouse game. And then you have this homicide detective who may or may not have an alcohol problem, who kind of, it's like a cognitive, emotional chess game, and they try and outwit each other. And even though he's got a drinking problem, he gets the job done, doesn't he? He gets the job done. And when this does happen, very, very rarely, when somebody like a serial killer does taunt the press or does taunt the police like BTK, it makes the news because it's an interesting story. However, the reality is that many serial killers are disorganized, they're impulsive, they make sloppy, silly mistakes during their crimes. And the reason they're at large for so long, the reason it takes the police so long to get them is simply because they don't have enough evidence, sheer luck, and also because some serial killers just use brute strength and force rather than, this criminal mastermind to get away with it, especially men killing women. So this is an oversimplification. As you've probably heard, there's difference between organised and disorganised serial killers is oversimplification, but I'm a simple man with simple needs. But you can say that roughly about 40% of serial killers are disorganised. If you want to know more about that, I've done a video on the difference between the two. But very briefly, disorganised serial killers have lower IQs. They live on the fringes of society. They attack their victims randomly, so they don't sort of pre-plan it. They don't stalk people for a long period like organised killers. They just have this frenzied urge and rage to kill, so they go out and do it randomly. They often don't move the bodies. They literally just leave the scene. They don't try and hide or they don't try and disguise the trail of evidence because they just want to get out of there. So what I'm saying is all of those things are not in keeping with this myth that they're these criminal masterminds. Myth number 5, my final myth about killers, is that they all, and probably my most contentious, is that they are all inherently evil or they are all monsters. So to me, this paints a simplistic and harmful picture. People who've taken life before come from diverse backgrounds. They have different motivations, experiences. They have different mental states. So judging them solely on this one act ignores the complexity of their life and circumstances. Even taking morality out of the question, it actually stops you from being able to prevent them going on from killing or from other people killing if you don't try and understand what their motivations are about. So I guess what I'm saying is somebody can have done something horrendous and it doesn't necessarily reflect their entire personality or character. I've spoken extensively about a young woman, not her real name, but I call her Yasmin in my book and on my other videos about her. Again, I'll leave the descriptions in the links. Who was 18 years old, who killed her nephew in a flash of psychosis. She genuinely was mentally ill. She thought he had demons inside of him. She didn't try and cover her tracks. She was astounded when the police arrested her because in her psychotic, delusional mind, she thought she'd not done anything wrong. My point being is she's not a horrible antisocial person. What she did was horrific. Can't deny that. But she's not an evil person beneath it all. If you take away the mental illness, there's not anything dangerous there. Another, just off the top of my head, another man that I remember when I was a junior doctor on a medium secure unit, one of my first patients was hearing voices. He stabbed and killed his cousin, and I read about him before I met him on the ward, and he was very quiet, he was very unassuming, he was very meek, he was friendly, he was polite to the nurses, he was really nice towards the other patients. So if a couple came in who didn't have any money, and he bought them like snacks from the shop from the hospital. So again, what he did was horrific, but he's not a generally antisocial person. I'm not trying to minimize what he did. He got disowned by his family. I'm just saying that it surprised me when I was a junior doctor, the presentation of the person in front of me versus reading his index offence of what he did. So as the old adage going, the pants did not match the socks. If that's not saying, it definitely should be. Okay, quickly before we finish, I asked you, in the United Kingdom, you stats nerds, the Ministry of Justice, between 2009 and 2019, there are 129 criminals who are jailed for life and received a second life sentence for another offence. How many of those was that second offence murder? Before I answer that question, I just want to introduce you to this channel. This is a Schmike for Small Minds. I do a smorgasbord of videos relating to offending, mental illness, and the crossover betwixt the two. Got loads of videos. I've done some on Joe Rogan and his thoughts about why some women fall in love with serial killers, what I think about that. My 5 top tips for you if you're being stalked. Loads of stuff. Just go and chickadee check it out. And I implore you to subscribe. Not only does it help me out immeasurably, but it means you'll never get holes in your socks ever again. Nobody wants to see your big foosty toenail. Okay, let's get back to that. So, Ministry of Justice, 2009 to 2019, 129 criminals, jail for life. Of them, only 1 received a second life sentence for murder. Every other 128, it was for another offence, not murder. So that is just trying to hammer home the point of how rare it is for somebody who does it once to do it again. It's extremely rare. No matter what the press says, no matter this trying to scaremonger, etc., I'm bringing you facts, man. Facts. Okay, I've rambled on enough. All that is left to say is have a blessed day, and do not forget, I love you.